So, former President Jacob Zuma yesterday was closing the MK live sort of press briefing, and he was sharing about the history of the ANC. And he gave some reasons as to why he doesn't subscribe to the current ANC under the leadership of President Cyril Ramaphosa. And a very interesting thing that he actually mentioned was the fact that this current ANC had deviated from the original ANC, which he actually claims that it was founded by pastors. And he also mentions that there were also people who were traditional leaders like chiefs. Now, of course, one of my favorite ANC presidents is Chief Albert Letuli, who was a chief but also was a Christian. He was a convicted Christian and also a pastor. And he makes one of the most important statements that we can ever know, that freedom comes through the cross. And what he basically meant was that we can try and vote and basically assume that we are free, but until you are spiritually free, right, you're still in chains, you're still in bondage. But equally so, sometimes that when we are oppressed or even when we're in prison, but if we have the freedom that Christ offers us, we are actually genuinely free. So all the presidents, the first at least 4 presidents of the ANC were Christians. The first top 6 of the ANC, the people who founded the ANC, were all Christians. In fact, the majority of them were actually pastors. We know John Langalibalele Dube was a pastor. His deputy president, Walter Khubusana, was a pastor. Saul Plaatje, the first secretary general, was a pastor. We're talking about people who were conservative, educated Christians. Now, we're not saying these people were perfect, but I think this is important in our discussion as to how do we solve the problems of South Africa. It's important that you know that most of our solutions began in the church. So this is why we can't just discard the church and say we no longer have a role to play just because, well, you don't like Christianity or you assume that it's a Western religion and so on. But actually people who had the conviction of spiritual freedom that comes from Christ were the first ones to say, hey, man, we actually need to liberate our people because we understand what freedom is. And this actually was the first liberation movement in the whole continent. And it inspired all other liberation movements that are out there. So people might say, we don't like the church, we hate the church. But actually, when we do and say that, we sometimes are actually cutting the branch that we are sitting on, because this nation is built on Christian foundations. And I think this is why, you know, we have actually gotten to the place where we're at. This is why the ANC is at the place that it's at today, because it deviated, according to President Jacob Zuma, from those very foundations that were laid by those pastors, those first Christian pastors. And now we see that it's no longer about helping people, but actually it's about something else. So let's watch this video as President Zuma talks about this, and then I'll give a few thoughts at the end.
The ANC was established by our ancestors. The traditional leaders, our pastors were black, our intellectuals, to defend the black person who was being suppressed by the whites. And they knew what they were doing. And it was the organization of all of us. They were uniting us, because prior to that, the unity was not at that level. It was all these traditional leaders were in their areas, so to speak. But they realized that the black person is being taken out of his own country whilst living in his own country. And it was important for us to do so. And if we have to die for it, we must. And many have died for it, fighting for our liberation. I know that that situation is always made to be a very polite thing. Something is not a small thing. Many people died, many people stayed in prison, many were killed for fighting for their rights, tortured to death. Others were thrown into the sea, you never know, never find them again. Can only be a funny nation that says, okay, kwenzeka. You don't say let us stand and liberate ourselves. Precisely because that organization was established by those people, some of us will respect that organization which was established by our ancestors. Because it was correct, it was true, it was defending the nation. Now, if then the leaders of that organization at a given time turn away from what was given to all of us, they are actually undermining our ancestors who were correct and undermining the organization itself, which is our tool to liberate ourselves. And some of us were said, I'm leaving the ANC because it has gone out of the way. It's no longer the ANC we know. This is the Ramaphosa ANC. And we said it, and we'll continue saying it. They've deviated, they've moved out of the way. But this organization had made the struggle in South Africa to be known throughout the world. There are many things that they did. They sacrificed, they died. They followed from the organizations that were called or whatever in the past, that we will not mention them. As me, with a very sore heart, saying I'm not going to vote for the ANC, I want you to understand this. Why I said, much as I will vote for Mkhonto Sizwe, but I will never leave the ANC as a member. I will die the ANC. I was respecting our ancestors who established the ANC.
I think this is a very important discussion, because there's a lady while President Zuma speaking at the end, talking about the fact that this is our ancestors who were pastors and traditional leaders who actually came up with these ideas to liberate people, to defend the nation. And there's a lady who shouts out Tamaku, you know, and Tamaku obviously is a Xhosa word that says praise to the ancestors. It's like a praise sort of expression or word. But she doesn't say praise Jesus for saving these guys and convicting their hearts, and then beginning to tell people that there's real and genuine freedom, and that we want people to be liberated holistically, both spiritually, emotionally, but also in the physical, right? So they're not saying praise Jesus. And that's the weird part, is that they are now praising their ancestors. Well, but I think for them, the definition for ancestors is spirits that are alive today that basically can affect change in the world. So that's my take on this video, is that we got to praise Jesus. We've got to acknowledge the church. We've got to thank the church for its contribution in this country, for the things that Christianity has ever done to help black people, because a lot of people always focus on what the missionaries did and all the negative things. But I think that if we're going to be honest and fair, we've got to say there were some bad things that came from the missionaries, or, you know, the Western church, if you will. But there were some amazing things that came from our African Christian brothers. And in fact, if you look anywhere where there's been a need to liberate black people, Christians were always the first ones. When you go to Ethiopia, the country that was never colonized, it was Christianity, you know, that was the strong foundation. You go to Haiti, the nation that defeated 3 empires and had a revolution for independence. The first thing they did was to make Christianity a state religion, because they acknowledged what helped them get there in the first place. Even you know, the ideas of Pan-Africanism that began in America, all of these things have been given to the world, to Africa, by the church. And so we mustn't actually you know, take that praise and give it to someone else, but we've got to acknowledge the role that the church plays. But I'd love to hear your thoughts and what you guys think on this. This is Bisrat for Africa, a channel dedicated to giving you Christian commentary on religious and spiritual matters. We'll see you guys on the next video.